Good morning, friends of the media. Thank you for coming to the media briefing this morning. The Chief Executive will say a few words and then she'll take questions from the floor. Now, can I invite the Chief Executive to speak? Friends of the media, members of the public, good morning. First of all, if I would like to first talk about the anti-epidemic fund, the employment support scheme. Well, last night was the deadline for application for the first batch. So I'd like to give you some update. Now, we have received applications from 168,799 from employers. 259,860 applications are from the self-employed. Now, if you might recall that we estimate that there may be about 207,000 eligible employers, but with the latest assessment, especially we've taken out the employers of the catering industry, because there is an industry-specific subsidy scheme for the catering industry, so employers no longer eligible under the employment support scheme. And then we've also taken out some duplicate MPF, some with also accounts, which is duplication of MPF accounts. So now our latest assessment is that there are 250,000 and 256,000 eligible employers. So now with the number of applications, that's 66% of the total number of eligible employers. That means 2/3 of the eligible employers have applied under the employment support scheme. That means they have undertaken to not lay off staff when they're receiving a subsidy. Hopefully this will give employees confidence. Well, you might recall last week I said here that for the first batch of applications that have been processed and subsidies ready to be dispersed, that it covers 25,000 employers. I gave you the details. Now I'd like to talk about a second batch of processed applications, 34,000 employers in total, and 30,000 self-employed persons. Now, for the 30,000 eligible employers, they could receive $6.6 billion in wage subsidy. As for the subsidy, as for self-employed, is $225 million. Now, for this batch, again, 98% of the employers are SMEs. In other words, they employ less than 50 employees. For this second batch of processed applications covering 34,000 employers, they will be receiving notification tomorrow, and the next day or two, transfers will be made to their bank accounts. And so they'll be receiving the wage subsidy. It's the same for the self-employed. Within the same time frame, they're going to collect the one-off $7,500 of subsidy. So for the first and second batches of processed applications, I'll tell you how much is involved. There are now 59,500 employers involved and covering 490,000 employees. The wage subsidy totals $11.4 billion. In other words, for every employee, the average wage subsidy for June, July, and August is $23,200. That's very close to our ceiling. You might recall that for each employee, we would provide no more than $9,000 of wage subsidy per month. So $9,000 times 3 months, that's $27,000. And as I said, the average wage subsidy for each employee is $23,200. That's 86%. So that means people are making the most of the scheme or of the wage subsidy we're providing. And employers have to go by their undertaking to use this full amount for paying wages, and they cannot lay off any staff in June, July, and August. Now, there are other follow-up tasks that we have to do. First, for the we have to complete other applications received in the first tranche that covers and 10,000 employers and more than 200,000 self-employed persons. So we must process their applications quickly and give them the subsidy. And then the second follow-up task is to announce the list of employers under the employment support scheme, and also to publish the amount of subsidy given, because there's been concern at the beginning when the scheme was announced that how we can make sure employers will live up to their promises. So that's why we have this as a means for unions and others to monitor the employers. So for the first batch of processed applications, the list of the employers will be announced next week. And from then on, 1 week after we've processed applications, the list of employers will be uploaded to our website. I'm sure you will be all very busy after that. You'll have to check this list probably, and then you'll see how many employees are covered by each employer with this undertaking. But I must stress again here, please do not try to stigmatize employers. This is a difficult time, and employers are making the applications because they want to ride over or tide over the difficult times together with their employees. They don't want to lay off their employees. They want to pay the employees a certain amount of wages, and also they want to retain the employees when business becomes better and so on. Now, apart from this transparency measure so the public could monitor the employers, the government will also be monitoring employers. We have random inspection approach to check whether information provided by the employers is accurate and true. And then based on our experience with the first tranche of application, then we will prepare for receiving applications for the next tranche that covers the period September, October, and November this year. And we hope to start receiving applications in July or August. Now, this is large-scale wage subsidy scheme, that is the employment support scheme, that amounts to $81 billion. It's because we don't want unemployment rate to get worse. Now, this afternoon, the government will be announcing the latest unemployment rate for March, April, and May, because we announced the unemployment rate on a quarterly basis, not on a monthly basis. You might recall for the unemployment rate for February to April, everyone was taken aback. For the unemployment rate between February and April compared to January to March, the unemployment rate shot up by a full percent to over 5%. And then this afternoon, the government will be announcing the unemployment rate for the period January to March and February to April. The unemployment rate has gone up by a full percentage point. And now this afternoon you can see what the latest unemployment rate is for March to May. We'll see whether it's still a rapid increase or whether the increase is slowing down. Now, we see the same increase in the CSSA system. Since the beginning of this year, we've seen soaring cases applying for CSSA because of unemployment. So month on month, the CSSA increase went up by 10% in March alone, 10.9% to be exact. And then in April, the increase is even more worrying. It was 24% increase in a single month of CSSA applications due to unemployment. Now, for May, the figure is going to be announced soon. May compared to April, the increase was only 1.4%. It's still an increase, but that means there are more cases receiving CSSA, but we're seeing slowing down of the increase rate. Now we have 18,427 CSSA cases. You know, I always like to compare the figures. When I left my post as Director of Social Welfare District, the figure then was far higher. Now, this time around, because of the economic downturn and various reasons, the unemployment actually is not as bad as it was during SARS. During SARS, the unemployment was more than 8%. As the epidemic starts to stabilize, we're going to relax certain social distancing measures. And starting from this Sunday, we're going to receive applications for the $10,000 cash payout. We hope that will boost local spending. And hopefully, then there may be some improvement in the economy. What is important is that we remain confident. Now, you can see here on the backdrop, employment, economy stability. It's all about stability at the end, of course, as we try to boost employment and bolster the economy. Because without stability, even though business activities resume or the unemployment rate increase slows, things could take a turn for the worse without stability. Here, therefore, I'd like to say a few words about legislative work. Now, the Central People's Government has decided that the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress will promulgate a national security law for Hong Kong. Well, as I said before, the reasons because in recent years, Hong Kong has seen various turbulences, and since last June, we've seen much increased risk that may endanger the country and Hong Kong. So we want to strive for stability. And there is this loophole in terms of and protecting national security. We need to plug that loophole as soon as possible, because without national security, Hong Kong cannot remain stable on a long-term basis. So I hope, or rather, I appeal to those who have been resorting to the same means to demonize and stigmatize such work. I appeal to them to stop, because they are, when they do this, they're pitching themselves against the people of Hong Kong. The people of Hong Kong want to see stability again. They want a safe environment where they could work and live. Now, this is a national law, and it's the National People's Congress Standing Committee that would be promulgating the law. So before the work is completed, I cannot really comment, but I would like to stress a few points, especially having listened to the different opposition voices locally and abroad, because I believe this opposition has no ground. First of all, this legislative exercise is totally constitutional and lawful. For any country, national security is a matter for the central government. It will not be left to a local government to enact laws on national security. Hong Kong is unique because of the one country, two systems. Now, under the one country, two systems, the CBG is showing confidence to the two special administrative regions of Hong Kong and Macau. So they have left it to us to enact legislation to protect national security. But it doesn't mean the Central People's Government has then given up its powers or rights on such matters. Now we have the highest lawmaking body, or we have the highest level of law to deal with the matter, that is the Constitution. So it's in line with the Constitution of the People's Republic of China, and this decision was made. It's also the highest power organ, that is the National People's Congress, that made the decision. You might note that last week, Deputy Director Zhang Yong of the Legal Affairs Committee of the National People Congress said this is the first time that there is this arrangement to pass a law, but because usually decisions and explanations are made at the level of the Standing Committee, but this time around was at the level of the National People's Congress. Now, first of all, Article 1 says that, well, first of all, in the base law, it says that we are an inalienable part of the People's Republic of China. Article 12 and Article 18. Article 12 says that we have the National People's, we have the we are local administrative unit of the People's Republic of China, and Article 18 says that the national laws could be included in Annex 3 to the Basic Law for application locally by way of promulgation or legislation. Of course, this time it is by promulgation. Therefore, the arrangement is totally constitutional and lawful. It's beyond doubt, and it should not be challenged by foreign governments. While these governments only need to look at how they protect their own national security, and they should accept that the Central People's Government is taking on this task. The second principle is about being reasonable and legitimate. Now, it's been 23 years. We are part of the People's Republic of China, but we don't have a mechanism to protect national security. This is a risk to not just the 7 million plus people in Hong Kong, it's also a risk to the 1.4 billion people in the country. So we've waited a long time, and we've seen what's happened in the past year. For any responsible central government cannot just turn a blind eye to it and drag its feet on anything. That's why taking this action at this time is reasonable and legitimate, and there is a wide support from the community. You know, there's an organization that collected 3 million signatures in 10 days. I and my principal officials also went to a street station to give our signatures to show our support for this task. Now, the people of Hong Kong supporting this task is because of what's been happening in the past year. And in fact, even now, every now and then you see violence cases in Hong Kong, and there's an intervention by foreign forces. They really are sick and tired of that. And third point I'd like to make is that this is, after all, a national law. So there is definitely a challenge for this national law to be promulgated in Hong Kong. Now, before the provisions are available, there are concerns and anxieties, and I fully appreciate that. I and my colleagues have met with foreign chambers of commerce or consulates or consuls general and people from the business sector and other organizations. While they understand and support this work, but they do express concerns too. Now, I think what's important is that we keep firmly to the principle of one country, two systems, and then as long as we share a common wish, we are able to overcome these challenges. Now, our common wish must be for Hong Kong to resume stability. As it's been said, the law is just to target a small handful of people who are acting in a way to undermine national security. And the decisions made it clear that there are 4 types of activities targeted: acts of secession, subverting state power, organizing and carrying out terrorist activities, and activities interfering with Hong Kong SAR's internal affairs by foreign or external forces. So we are talking about protecting the vast majority of Hong Kong people and their legitimate rights and interests. And since on the 28th of May, the National People's Congress and passed the decision, the central authorities have been listening to views since then. I and my colleagues have also been passing on views. Now, we will continue to do that, and we hope that the legislative exercise could be completed without hiccup, and then we could resume stability in Hong Kong. I'll take questions now.
The floor is now open for questions. Please raise your hand if you intend to ask questions, and please identify your name and organization before you speak. The reporter at the back, please. I'm from HKO1. Deng Zhonghua, the Deputy Director of the Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office, said the majority of the enforcement work of the national security law would be enforced by the SAR government, but Beijing will retain jurisdiction under very special circumstances. What is meant by very special circumstances, if the central authorities retain jurisdiction on certain cases, would it jeopardize Hong Kong's right of final jurisdiction and jurisdiction? Would it erode one country, two systems? Deng said that basic law is not to be challenged and no law of the HKSAR should conflict with the basic law. Would it supersede the safeguards on human rights? The gathering prohibition order will lapse on Thursday. Is there any plan to further relax it? Thank you for your questions. First of all, about the prohibition on group gatherings. There are certain social distancing measures, including Cap 599G, the prohibition on public gatherings regulations. It will lapse this Saturday, that is the 18th of June at midnight. Today is Tuesday. And basically, every Tuesday, we would deal with these regulations. I cannot disclose the details now, but this morning I talked about stimulating local consumption, and I said that since the pandemic is easing, the public looks forward to resumption of social activities, and as such, I feel that measures should be relaxed gradually. But it would be risky if we completely lift the measures. In recent times, in some cities such as Beijing, we have seen imported cases, and some countries have seen an influx of cases after relaxing measures. As our experts, such as Professor Ying Kwok Yung and Professor David Hui said, we must enhance our testing capabilities so that we can prepare for further relaxation of measures. This afternoon, the Secretary for Food and Health will announce details of the relaxations. As for my comments on what Mr. Deng Zhonghua, the Deputy Director of HKMAO, said yesterday, as I said, this is a national law and work is ongoing at the NPC Standing Committee. That is why I cannot comment on any provisions or the presence of any provisions and how they would be interpreted. Like I said, this is a national law. It seeks to protect not only the safety of the Hong Kong SAR, but it would also allow us to better safeguard national security. So this is a matter of national significance, dealing with a national issue under a national law. In terms of the powers of the central authorities, we would have to wait till the provisions are available or announced. The key is that everything must be lawful, and when Mr. Wang Shengfu outlined the draft, he talked about 5 principles. That is one country, two systems, acting in accordance with the law, protecting the legitimate rights of Hong Kong citizens. As for the relevant principles, when we look at the relevant conventions such as the ICCPR, under the ICCPR, various individual freedoms are safeguarded, but they would still be bounded by the principle of national security. So on an international perspective, in some cases, national security would be an overriding factor, but in terms of striking a balance in the legislation and in future trials, how can the safeguards be ensured without jeopardizing individual freedoms? We would have to wait till the actual provisions are available. So in this regard, please stay tuned. The reporter at the back in stripes, please.
Okay, so about the ban on public gatherings, you said that chances are that the ban may be relaxed but not lifted. Could you explain in English why, taking into account that the COVID-19 situation has stabilized? And second question about the central officials saying the government in mainland will have the jurisdiction in most serious national security cases. You said that you can't comment on the specifics now, but how can you reassure Hong Kong people that our independent judiciary power will not be undermined, that including the final adjudication? And lastly, about the proposed referendum. Your administration has criticized this referendum to see if there will be a strike over the national security laws. But some organizers said the right to strike is actually ensured by the basic law, and they questioned if your government has violated provisions related to protection against anti-union discrimination. And how do you make of their criticism? Thank you.
First of all, the question about the Cap 599G on prohibiting group gatherings. It applies to all sorts of group gatherings of a certain number of persons. It is not targeting a particular type of group gatherings. Now, at the moment, we are prohibiting gatherings of more than 8 persons, with some exceptions, for example, provided under other regulations for religious gatherings and things like that. Okay. So we really need to take into account the several factors that I have been explaining on this occasion in the last 4 months. This sort of social distancing measure is very significant and very relevant in any anti-epidemic work. But we have to strike the balance between at least 3 main factors. One is, of course, the public health concerns. Secondly is the economy, the impact on the economy. Thirdly is the acceptance, or I would now call the tolerance of the people. Because if you continue to keep these measures in place, people become intolerant. So they will not comply with these regulations. So at every stage of looking into this subject of group gathering, we are trying to find a balance amongst the 3 factors. Now, as far as the current situation is concerned, I would say that the public health or the epidemic situation is rather stable. But that doesn't mean that we need not be vigilant. You have seen other cities that have gone for some reopening, relaxation, and then they see a re-emergence of COVID-19 cases. So the direction at this point in time, taking into account the impact on the economy and the people's acceptance, I would say is relaxation. But relaxing how far is not an exact science. It is something that we need to deliberate. I can say that we have fully deliberated and we are now seeking endorsement from the Executive Council because that particular regulation has to be authorized by the Chief Executive in Council. Now, above comments made by the Deputy Director of the Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office yesterday on an occasion to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the promulgation of the Basic Law. Without the details about the provisions in the legislation and how they're going to be applied, it is not possible for me and not appropriate because I'm not party to the lawmaking institution to comment on the individual comments made by my mainland counterparts, except to reiterate the very important principles guiding this lawmaking process. And they are laid down in the explanatory statement to the draft decision discussed by the National People's Congress leading to the approval on the 28th of May. And included in the 5 main principles are the principles to ensure that there is full compliance with this very important principle of 1 country, 2 systems, that everything has to be done in accordance with the law, and the legitimate rights and freedoms of the Hong Kong people are being safeguarded and protected. And I noticed that subsequent to that explanatory statement, the Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office issued on the 29th of May another statement elaborating on these important principles, and on top of that, reiterate that this new piece of legislation will not change Hong Kong's high degree of autonomy and will not affect judicial independence, including that of final adjudication. As far as this proposed referendum, there is no such thing as a referendum in Hong Kong or in our political process. Your question is about whether strikes are legitimate and protected under the constitutional provisions for basic law. I think one has to look at the purpose of the strike. If the purpose of a strike has nothing to do whatsoever with the workplace, with the being members of a union and voicing their concerns against their employers and so on, then it will not be covered by that sort of constitutional protection. Thank you. 最後一條啦，好嘛？
係，我哋答多最後一條。
Final question, please.
The one in blue, please. Good morning, Mrs. Lam. I'm from Apple Daily. Now, yesterday you published a video to say that this law will not affect the rights and freedoms enjoyed by the people of Hong Kong in accordance with the law. But then the Hong Kong Macau Affairs Office said that if there are certain media reports that shed a negative light on the country, then it could be a problem. And then yesterday, a statement was issued by the press sector to say that freedom of press and freedom of speech will not be affected. So how can you give an assurance that there's not going to be undermining of such freedoms? Now, what is it the case that what we've been reporting would still be allowed after the national security law is promulgated? And on the enforcement of the law. Now, if we, it's said that if we go entirely by the common law system, it will not be reasonable and practical. But then the Bar Association holds a different view. They don't see why we don't keep to the common law system. So what is your view? And finally, you said you're going to relax the gathering ban, but then you won't lift it altogether. But you mentioned Professor David Hui just now. Well, so among your experts, he, in particular, Professor Hui said that there's little significance of the gathering ban. He believes it could be lifted altogether. So why are you saying that you won't lift it now? Now, 3 questions. Let me take the last question first. We are very fortunate, if I could put it this way. Now, in handling the epidemic, I have 4 experts. They are all professors on various fronts. They've given us many balanced views. But then the 4 experts don't always see eye to eye. Some experts believe the 28-day line is important. Other experts believe that's not possible. Some experts attach great importance to testing. Others attach greater importance to clinical treatment. So what we do is we share with the experts what we plan to do next, and then we listen to their views. Now, this week we're going to relax the gathering ban, and last Saturday I met with the 4 experts at the meeting. Again, there was not a common view. Some believe we should tread carefully, some believe we could lift the ban, and an expert actually said that we are talking about measures involving entries and arrivals. Arrivals in Hong Kong, and some measures have to do with social distancing. We can't relax all measures in one go, or there could be a problem. So I must tell you that it's not that one person will call the shots. Even I cannot call the shots. Sometimes I have to talk to people managing our borders, or those in charge of the economy or transport, and then we have to work together to find a way that is the most practical and acceptable to the public. Sometimes you have to lift, sometimes you have to suppress, so depending on the circumstances. But anyway, please wait for the Secretary for Food and Health to give you the details later today. The other 2 questions, I'll take them in one go. Before the national security law is out, and we just want to talk about a provision that's being speculated, or you ask me whether certain things are allowed under law in future by describing a scenario. Well, I'm not even part or a party to the lawmaking process. So it's really hard for me to say. Now, of course, this is national law, so it's drafted in line with the mainland system. But then it doesn't mean that the mainland legal system is totally against legal principles that you take very seriously. Now, Zhang Xiaoming gave a speech last week, and yesterday in Mr. Deng Zhonghua's speech there is a paragraph. And that's always been my understanding too, and I understand the Secretary for Justice has also been trying to convey the same message in her blog. Now, that is for the common law system or the mainland law system, yes, they may be different in terms of the drafting, because we have many pieces of subsidiary legislation, they cover the fine details, but maybe the mainland laws are not like that. So that's where they're different. But then when it comes to principles, they share many common points. For example, presumption of innocence, no double criminality, and so on. And then there are specific conditions to say whether a certain act constitutes an offense and so on. So there are strong principles to go by. For example, the defendants or the accused must be represented legally. They must have the right to defend themselves, and the proof of burden lies with the burden of proof lies with the prosecution. So. And then that leads to the question of whether the law would be retrospective, and both Mr. Zhang and Mr. Deng has said that there should be no retrospective effect. So you don't need to worry that when the law is out, it won't be clear, because at the end of the day, it's for our authorities to enforce the law. And then we will go by the legal system we're familiar with, and so there must be specifics like on the legal procedures and the source of the basis of the enforcement powers and so on. So this will have to be very clear for us to enforce the national security law in Hong Kong. And finally, I'm keeping to this point. Please accept and understand why we have to do it. What we're doing is totally constitutional lawful, and the only purpose of this task is to protect Hong Kong and the country. And I hope that's the common wish of everyone. Later, when we have the provisions, then certainly we will be explaining that to you again. Thank you.